at peace, stress free, let it be.
Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new here. My name is Ashley and today we are going to be doing another thrift flip. Now I have already done this thrift flip and it came out pretty good for my first time like trying to do anything remotely close to that. So if you want to check out my first attempt, it'll be linked right here. But you all left some really helpful tips underneath of that video, so I wanted to apply those tips and try to make an even better top. So if this is your first time getting this tutorial, congratulations. I'm sure it's going to be a lot better because I'm going to be applying all of those tips. And if you did watch my other video, then I hope you'll stick around to see how I improved. I think it's going to come out so much better. So here's the shirt that we're going to be thrift flipping. This is what it looks like on. Just like a nice big oversized t-shirt. It has a really cool graphic on the front. And then the back is just blank, but it also has this like bleached like splatter detail on it. So that is what we're working with, and I usually don't use patterns, but I'm going to be using, I think it's Nava Rose's pattern for this, so I will have it linked down below if you want to print it out and try for yourself. So if you want to see how I turn that t-shirt into a super cute corset, keep watching and stick around until the end to see how it turns out. Also, if you like this video and you find it helpful, be sure to give me a thumbs up down below so that I know. Also, since this shirt is a Rolling Stone shirt, leave a comment down below of what band t-shirt you would want to turn into a super cute corset. And if you like this video and you want to see more like this and or from me, then feel free to subscribe. Alright, let's get started. First, let's go over everything that you're going to need for this project. Of course, you're going to need the t-shirt that you want to turn into a corset, as well as the corset pattern that I have linked down below, and something to trace the pattern out with. I'm using chalk. And something I actually didn't use in my last video, but I am going to try using in this one, is fusible interfacing, just to stabilize the fabric a little bit and prevent the boning from poking through and just make it more like structured, I guess. I'll have the brand that I got linked down below. I just got it from Amazon. Then of course you're gonna need an iron to fuse the interfacing to your fabric. And then for my corset personally, I'm going to be using eyelets on the back and lacing them up. So I have an owl, which I'm gonna use to poke the hole of the eyelet, and then I have an eyelet like puncher machine, and then I have the actual like eyelets or grommets. I also got all of those from Amazon, so I will have them linked down below as well. And then I'm just using this braided polyester thread to lace it up in the back. You could use ribbon, or I don't even know. There's a bunch of different things that you could use, but I am going to be using this polyester thread stuff that I got. You're going to need boning to structure the corset. I'm using this plastic boning. I will also have it linked down below. And then of course the things that you need for sewing, like a sewing machine and scissors and thread, all that good stuff. So to start, you want to lay your t-shirt out nice and flat, make sure there's no bumps. Option to cut it along the side seams like in half so that you have two, like a front and a back of your t-shirt. I didn't feel the need to do that in this video, but I did do it in my last one. I think if I did it again, I would probably cut it in half. Just a lot easier to get the wrinkles out, I feel like. So next I started tracing the pattern onto the shirt where I wanted it. Of course I wanted that big graphic in the front to be the front and like center of my corset. So that is where I am putting the front of the corset pattern. However, I wanted the letters as a different part of the t-shirt, so I just cut part of the pattern off and cut that piece of the pattern out of another piece of the t-shirt. You're gonna see it here in a second. The large front piece actually wasn't the only piece that I cut the top off. I also cut the top off the like side pieces, which are the B pieces, as well as the C pieces. I cut them in half so that I could get like the letters on there, like the Rolling Stones on there. I also made sure to label all of those little pieces that I was cutting off from the pattern so that I didn't like lose them and mix them up or whatever. I wanted to use as much of the t-shirt as possible, which is why I'm also using the t-shirt as the lining fabric. So I just went ahead and doubled the pattern and traced it all over the back of the shirt, the front of the shirt. And then for the inside back panel, I decided that I wanted to keep the original like tag part that says like the Rolling Stones, which makes it clear that it's like an official Rolling Stones t-shirt, I guess. So I just traced one of the C pieces around that so I could keep it. Something that I actually didn't do in this one that I did in the last one and ended up regretting was leaving seam allowance when I was tracing the pieces and cutting them out and everything. I think the pattern was for a size small and I typically wear a size small, so I decided to not leave any seam allowance on this one because last time it ended up being a little bit too big. So then once I had all of the pieces of the pattern traced where I wanted them, I just cut it out. Once I had it all cut out, I went in and started pinning it. So I took the right sides and put them together and pinned along that raw edge so that when I folded it out, the right sides were both facing out and the wrong sides were both facing the other way. And I also made sure to pin all of the smaller pieces that I cut out in the same way, obviously. Then I started sewing all those pieces down using a straight stitch and a 3.5 stitch length. I'm just sewing right along where I pinned on the wrong sides of the fabric with the right sides facing each other, and because I didn't leave any seam allowance, I ended up sewing really close to the edge so that I could use as much of the fabric as possible. So here's what it looks like on the wrong sides, and then when you open it up, you can't see any stitches on the right sides. So I just sewed everything together for both the front and the lining pieces, and this is what they came out looking like. Now in hindsight, I think something that I would have done differently, and I'm telling you so that hopefully I can make it a little bit easier on you, is cut out the individual pieces of the pattern from the interfacing first before sewing the whole pattern together, and then fuse the interfacing onto the individual pieces and then sew all of the pieces together with the interfacing already on. I think it would have just made things like so much easier. But obviously I did not do that. I cut the entire thing out of the interfacing all at once. So I basically just had one big middle piece with the straps and the middle pieces, and then I had the back panels as separate pieces. It worked out fine. I think it was just a little bit more difficult to like maneuver it, I guess. And just overall, I think it would have been easier if I did it the way that I just talked about. So now here is how I fused the interfacing. The interfacing has a soft side and a bumpy side. You put the bumpy side down onto the wrong side of your fabric, very important. Bumpy side, wrong side of fabric, you put them together, and then you need a scrap piece of fabric to put over top so that you're not ironing directly onto the interfacing. I have my iron set to one of the lowest heat settings just to be sure everything's like fine. I think that's what the instructions said as well, but I also just wanted to make sure I didn't like melt anything. And yeah, I'm basically just ironing on top of that scrap piece of fabric over and over and making sure that everything is nice and stuck down. I also did cut my interfacing just a little bit bigger than the actual top, just in case, I don't know. So I just went through and cut off all of that extra interfacing that was on the outside. So then I decided to make these panels for the back where I would put the grommets. So I just cut like these rectangles out that were the length of the corset, and I folded them in half. I added interfacing, obviously. I ironed them so that they were like nice and creased. Then once I had those rectangular pieces all set, I put the two pieces of the corset together with the right sides facing each other and sandwiched those rectangular pieces in on the edges of the like back panel things with the raw edges all lined up facing outwards. I don't know why that's so hard to explain, but you can see what I'm doing, kind of. So then I went through and did a straight stitch all along the top of the corset. So on the sides, the straps, along the neck, and then on the other side and the strap, obviously. I only did the top though. I made sure not to do the bottom because we are going to need that open for the next part. And I was trying to show how these rectangular pieces looked, but I ended up not liking the way that they sat, so I actually did them a different way. I basically took them out by seam ripping them and then removing them, and then I folded them the opposite way so that the right sides were together and the wrong sides were facing out, and then I just sewed along the ends on both sides. Then I turned it right side out so that those seams were on the inside, and then I placed the top part along where that top seam was gonna go on the corset. This was so that I could re-sew that top seam and then re-sew the side seam where it was like holding it, but the top seam wouldn't be on the panel because it just made it like lumpy. I don't know why. Or the rectangle thing. I'm like exhausting myself trying to explain this part because I just like randomly like did it. This isn't part of the pattern or anything. I actually ended up liking that a lot better. It just looked a lot cleaner. So then once I got it where I was happy with, I turned the whole thing right side out, and then I had to turn the straps right side out as well, which was a bit of a challenge, but I did it. It just took a little bit of time. And then I really liked the way it looked, but I felt like it just needed one more thing, and that was a top stitch. So I just top stitched all around the side part and then the top where I had previously stitched on the inside, just to kind of push everything down and like flatten it. I didn't top stitch for a while, and just lately I've been a huge fan of top stitching. I've been appreciating it a lot more. It just makes things look so much more professional in my opinion. So once I was done with the top stitching, it was time to put in the boning. So I used a ruler to figure out where I wanted the boning channels to go. I did 6 boning channels, so I did 2 in the front, 2 right here on the side, and then 2 on the like back side part. I used the ruler to get an accurate measurement of the space between the boning channels, as well as draw like straight lines so that my boning channels weren't all like lopsided. And then I used the boning to trace on both sides so that I knew how wide I needed to make my boning channels. Could also just do this by measuring the boning width and then drawing the lines with the ruler, but I just wanted to trace the boning apparently. Once I had my 6 boning channels messily drawn out, I went and just did a straight stitch down all of the lines that I drew so that I would have my boning channels. Like the top stitch, this is gonna be a stitch that you're obviously gonna see, so you wanna make it nice and super straight. And I also used a red bobbin thread so that I would have like a contrasting color on the inside if I ever wanted to make it reversible for whatever reason, but I also just think it looked cool and matched the shirt, I don't know. And I just also didn't have a bobbin with black thread in it and really just didn't feel like winding one. So then once I cut all the little threads off the end, it was time to put in the boning. What I'm showing here is the last corset I made where the boning was kind of curved because it's on this like wheel. So I actually looked up a way to flatten it and gave it a try and it worked. So first I cut the boning to the lengths that I needed it for each of the channels. I pretty much just measured it on the shirt and then snipped it. Then I went back over to my ironing board, laid the piece of boning nice and flat, put that scrap piece of fabric right on top, and then used the steam part of my iron to kind of steam the plastic down. Basically, you're like melting it flat because it's plastic and so it's melting a little bit, but not like crazy because I still had it on low heat. And yeah, I basically just had to go over it a few times with the iron and with the steam, and it flattened, so I did that to all the rest of the pieces. Now for the last corset I made, an issue I had was that the boning was poking through the t-shirt and ripping it, and that could have been because I didn't have the interfacing, but it was also because, as one of the comments pointed out, I didn't file down my boning, which I didn't know you were supposed to do. I also didn't have a file to file it down, so I looked up how to like soften the edges, and basically it said that you could burn it if it's plastic, so I burned it. But I don't have a lighter, so I did it in a candle. I did burn the top and the bottom of the boning. I really only needed to burn one side though, because I was gonna go through and cut the boning in a second anyway. So then I placed all of the boning inside of their channels, and once I had it all in, I took my thumb and pulled the boning down so that the length of my thumb was, or the width of my thumb, I guess that's the width. The width of my thumb was where the boning started from the top of the corset, if that makes sense. So just a little piece was hanging out the bottom. I used my thumb as a measurement so I could get all of the pieces even. I snipped that little piece on the bottom off, and I actually pushed the boning in and then realized I needed to remelt it, so I went and remelted the bottom part of the boning again. And then I put all of the boning back in the boning channels with about a thumb's width of space at the bottom. So for this next part, it would probably be a little bit easier to use like bias or ribbon or just like another piece of fabric or something. But what I opted to do, because I didn't want anything covering the graphic, and I had the graphic on like the entire front and also the back panels, I opted to actually just fold the front and the back inwards and pin it. It was just a very little like fold inside though. So it was a little bit hard. I had a lot of pins. I did stab myself a few times. Basically, you just want to make sure that that whole bottom is closed off and folded in so there's no raw edges showing. And I also made sure on the back panels to fold it up to where that like rectangle ended so that that was also perfectly in line. And then I just went in again with a straight stitch and sewed all along the bottom part to close it up. I did make sure to stay super close to the edge though, because the pieces of fabric that I folded in were like really small. There was like not a lot of fabric there, so I needed to go really close to the edge to make sure that no raw edges like popped out. So once I got that all sewn together, it was time to put in the grommets or the eyelets or whatever. I basically took those two little rectangle pieces, I folded them so that they were together so that the holes that I was punching were gonna be like in line with each other. Then I just took the owl and stuck it through. You should probably mark where you want your holes to be. I didn't. They ended up being pretty straight, but I don't know, it just probably would have made it a little bit easier. But I just poked 6 holes through both pieces of fabric. Once I had all the holes where I wanted them, I used the little eyelet puncher thing to punch an eyelet sized hole where I had previously put the other holes with the owl. I will say that this was a whole lot easier than the way that I was trying to put the eyelets on the other one with a hammer and like the thing. That was hard and loud. So then once I used the top part of the grommet puncher to punch the holes that I needed, I took these black grommets that came in the pack and I made sure that I was putting the outside of the eyelet on the outside of the shirt. Be super careful with that because it's gonna make it look clean and you don't want it on the inside obviously. But I just took the top part of the eyelet and I put it through the hole, and then I took the bottom part of the eyelet and put it at the bottom of the grommet tool, and then I just clamped them together and I had an eyelet or a grommet or whatever you want to call it. So then I repeated that for all 12 holes and measured how long I needed the like string that I was using to lace it up. And then since it's polyester, I was able to melt both ends of that so that I didn't have to worry about like fraying and all of that, because it did fray a lot. Okay, finally it's time to attach the straps. I actually had my boyfriend help me because I just couldn't figure out how to do it on my own. So So I put the corset on and then I pulled the strap to where I wanted it, had it in the back, and had him mark a line on the strap where it was like in line with the top part of the corset, like the back of the corset. And then I had him draw 2 lines on the side of the strap so that I knew like the width of the strap and exactly where I wanted it placed in the back. And then I cut the strap about 1/4 inch under the line that he made so that I didn't have like a bunch of like fabric in the back and it wasn't all bulky. And I seam ripped between the 2 lines that he had made on each side of the back of the corset so that I had a little hole that was the width of the strap. Then I put the strap into that hole so that the line was in line with the top part of the corset, pinned it down, and then just sewed a straight stitch right across there. I did make sure that the top of the front and the back of the corset were nicely tucked in so that no raw edges were showing, obviously. And then I made sure to go over the strap a couple of times, front and back, just to be sure that it was like reinforced, because you want your straps to be like nice and strong. And then that was it. So let me show you how it turned out. So here's the final product. I'm obsessed. I think it came out so much better than my other one. Obviously, I think I learned a lot from that experience and also from your comments that you all left on my other one. So thank you so much for leaving those comments. I really appreciate it. They were so helpful. Here's the back. I think it looks so cool. It says Rolling Stones. So it's like rolling stones, if that makes sense. Then it just laces up in the back. I do have the string kind of long, so I think I could probably cut it, but I just wanted to like be safe and have enough. I think it came out looking so cool. I'm so obsessed with this graphic and then how I got like the letters on the back, because I was concerned about that when I was looking at the shirt where I was gonna put the letters. I think it came out looking so good. I was trying to make it in time because I was going to a Rolling Stones concert and I really wanted to wear this, but I didn't finish it in time. That's okay. I'm sure there will be more. So that is everything. I hope that you found this tutorial super helpful, and if you did, be sure to give me a thumbs up down below so that I know. I hope that you enjoyed watching the process of making this, and I also hope that you try it out for yourself. And if you do, be sure to tag me on Instagram so that I can see what really cool shirt you made. Don't forget to leave a comment down below of which band t-shirt you would make into a corset if you were making one. And also don't forget, if you want to see more videos like this and from me, then feel free to subscribe. So I'm never going to take this top off. Thank you all so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you all in my next video. Bye!